Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me, I have a Jer.
Hello.
An Alex.
Fame.
And Ben.
The premier lands pilot of the format.
That's not true. Reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support of the Patreon over at patreon.com/loading. Ready, run. Let's start off with the best card you're not playing. Up today, we have Wheeler. Wheeler, what are your secrets? And is it land related?
Somewhat, because occasionally this card will just take all your opponent's lands repeatedly.
Wait, what?
So the card that I want to talk about is Agent of Treachery.
Oh.
It's 5 blue for a 2/3, so a 7 mana 2/3. When it ETBs, you gain control of target permanent. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. So you're probably saying, Ben, this is a 7 mana 2/3.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I don't want to pay 7 mana for this.
Okay.
I just want to reanimate this card. Or I want to flash it into play and then reanimate it. Or, you know, a different method of reanimation. A recurring nightmare.
Sneak attack.
Sneak attack, also quite good with this card.
Excellent.
So
Interesting.
the impact of just taking one of their permanents, even if it's just a land, early on, pretty big. When you get to do it multiple times over the course of a game, also not bad. We're at the point, I recently played this in I was trying out different things for Flash. I was playing a Flash Hulk deck that was also just a Reanimator deck. And I was looking for creatures that I didn't want to hardcast, but if I reanimated them or snuck them into play, they had a reasonable enter the battlefield on both sides. This card was suggested kind of as a joke initially, and then it proceeded to win me about 4 matches in a row.
I just love the idea that activate sneak attack. You're like, am I dead? You're like, no, but your land is mine.
Yeah, and again, it's any permanent, so taking a land early can be very backbreaking, especially against certain archetypes. Taking their planeswalker, taking their big creature, whatever it may be. It isn't, it's not just take a creature, take whatever. You get the flexibility of it. The body is obviously not great, but when you take enough things, you get so far ahead in the game that it doesn't matter. You'll kill them with other things. And then being able to recycle this and have this die in combat has ended up being more relevant than anything, because then you just get to buy it back.
I dare you to kill it.
Yeah.
The more secrets you have, the more easily you become my pawn.
I understand some hesitation about this card. Again, 7 mana 2/3, but in practice, it felt a lot stronger than it looked. Especially again with if you get this going with Recurring Nightmare, you're
Sure.
golden.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
That's
It becomes a ramp spell.
Oh yeah.
fine. Oh.
You've played Time Walk as a ramp spell, but welcome to Agent Treachery as a ramp spell.
And when you get to the second ability, which I haven't really talked about because it doesn't I don't think it'll happen that much.
Have you ever won a game with the second ability?
Twice.
Oh my god. All right.
Out of maybe 12 matches with it, but
Well, I mean,
still.
your opponent's probably supposed to concede by that point.
Yes. Well, I got to there because I was Kiki G-keying one. And,
Oh, that feels good.
yeah, that felt really good. But, yeah, they were super dead. When you get to the second ability, you just win the game.
More on Kiki Jiki later.
Yeah. All right. Well, as the premier lands pilot in the format, I'm very excited to introduce today's theme. A lot of people have been asking about it recently. A deep dive into a certain topic. Well, today we are going to be diving into lands.
Play 40 of them.
Done. Good episode. Thank you very much for watching. No, not quite. We're going to talk about the Lance archetype, and it may be a little bit different than what you think about, and I think a great way to broach the subject is to start with what is a Lance deck specifically in Highlander. If you've played lands in Legacy or if you've played lands in Modern, I don't know if there's lands in Vintage, maybe, probably not.
Well, there's probably more lands in Vintage than there would be in Modern.
Yeah. There's not really a land stack in Modern. Because, Dark Depths is banned. You don't have Fastball. And you don't have
No
Exploration.
Wasteland. That's pretty big.
Okay.
The closest you get to a land stack is Tron, and let's not.
Or the current
Or-
John Durennan 6 deck
Well,
game.
Shift.
Well,
Yeah.
So that's an interesting subject or question. Does Scapeshift count as a land stack, or is that a combo deck? Scapeshift is sort of its own weird thing. So let's talk about what is A lands deck, what are we talking about there? I'd like to throw to Jer for definitions. Jer, you want to take a shot at this one?
I usually like to try to break the lands archetype into two main subcategories, either decks that are playing a lands package or dedicated lands decks. The former has been a little bit more popular recently, which look more like regular mid-range decks with the addition of some tutors, usually crop rotation, Sylvan Scrying, sometimes expedition map, and strip mine, and some ways to recur that as a main game plan. Renin 6 was a huge boon to that strategy recently. That card is absurd. And then there's more dedicated lands decks that are playing your fast bonds, your explorations, all the land tutors. They're not really they're playing like Glacial Chasm, Crucible every time, Zuran Orb. Basically every card they have in their deck is looking to interact with lands in some way. So
here's an interesting question. We talk about Hoof and how Hoof has two game plans. There's, the Hoof amount, you play the Crater Hoof, and choo-choo, they're dead. Mm-hmm. But they also have a plan B, which is Dark Depths and Thespian. Oh my God, Dark Depths and Thespian's Stage are how I pronounce those cards. They'll play crop rotation. They'll play Primeval Titan. Does that count as a lands package in that particular way, or is that just an alternate win con? And what's the difference?
Not really, because in that deck they're not even primarily using their land tutors to get landsy cards. They're primarily using them to get Gaia's Cradle, and as a way to augment their Primeval Titan, which is a really strong
like
card.
your hits in that deck are like Gaia's Cradle and Forest.
Well,
apart from Depth Stage.
Kessig Wolf Run.
Yeah, but they're not looking to win the game via a lands package very often, apart from Depth Stage, and I attribute that more to their ability to abuse Primeval Titan.
So we're talking about lands packages. Let's try and get a definition for a lands package. Is that strip mine and a way to recur strip mine? Is it slightly more complicated than that?
Slightly more complicated.
You take strip and waste, the things that kill lands. You take the things that let you play lands from your graveyard, Crucible, Loam, Ramanap, and now mostly Renin 6. The card is so absurd that even if you're in the dark Bant package of a lands mid-range deck, you're splashing for Renin 6. And then you have the hey, let's get the tutor package of crop rotation, Sylvan Scrying, expedition map. You might have a little more bang for your buck and adding Entomb, adding Gamble,
Elvish Reclaimer, Knight of the Reliquary.
Yeah, there are all these tiny differences that are made depending on what your color configuration is and how aggressively you want to find that plan. But most of these cards are just fine for mid-range grinding.
I mean, I was gonna say you would play Knight of the Reliquary in a non-lands deck because it's just good.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah.
But it's also extra good.
And notably, the lands package doesn't include cards like Exploration, doesn't include cards like Fast Bond that are really either 0 or 100. They're either doing it all or not really doing anything.
Yeah.
Is there perhaps a spectrum, or dare I say ramp, of
how much lands? Well, I wanted to throw to you in this one in particular, Alex, because as an aggressive player, when you look at Black Mold, you probably including Wasteland. Mm-hmm. You might include Strip Mine.
Yep.
What is the opportunity cost to start playing a little bit more of the lands package for your clock? Is it something?
It's too much.
It's too much, and why?
It's too slow.
Okay.
A lot of the lands tutors, you're spending turns to find lands. The optimal lands that you would have in an aggressive deck like mine are just kind of one-time effects. It's Strip Mine used to knock out an early mana advantage or kill a problem land, and that's it. You're not looking to abuse it by using a lot of usually reasonably mana-intensive means to accomplish that. There's not really any low-end combo lands, and even some of the dirty jank stuff that I'm so fond of.
I'm just thinking about the
hashtag
yeah, I was gonna say,
Tomb of Arami.
All aboard the demon train.
The demon train, you're not going out of your way to find that, and if you are, you're doing it using
Demonic Consultation.
demonic consultation.
Amazing. Like, what do I need
which
right
would
now?
find you anything else anyways.
It is worth noting that there are other aggressive archetypes, though, that kind of go half in on the lands package.
Such as?
Well, Red and 6 is so absurd that red-green aggro is just like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Like, you drop it on turn 1 or turn 2. It lets you keep land-light hands with the fetches. And then your deck is probably using its points for strip. Because what else? Like, you could run, like, Mox, Strip, Jite.
I
And
guess
then
if you've got a 2/2 that's beating them to death, then stripping them every turn, you have a clock. It's fine.
Yeah, that's a big divide again, right? Because we talk all about a lot of the times we talk about how disruption alone is not
Sure.
enough to kill like combo or other archetypes like control, and you need pressure, which is where that divide comes in between the like circus lands of like exploration, Molokuing.
Like, even Ren and 6 has a clock. It's very slow, but it will...
One damage to any target.
It's a lot faster when your opponent's not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning again, I think, what a lands deck does. So we're talking in a lot of these examples about playing lands as disruption. I think the lands deck is unique in the fact that you're using the lands to win, not as something in the middle there, because we just talked about this. Just strip mining your opponent alone does not win a game. It can win a game. You can be biased and remember the games where you get wastelanded on turn 2 and you don't get another land and you stumble, and that's what does
Yeah,
it. But
we're talking about the difference between a garnish and a main course. So
Yeah, there's no amuse-bouches
Well,
here.
good phrase.
So I feel like we're starting to get a pretty good definition of what a lands deck is. It's not a deck that includes a lands package, because there's a good definition there. It's not Hoof, where you can win with Dark Depths and Thespian Stage as sort of an alternate plan B, because you're like, well, it's pretty free to roll that card in there as well. And you're not necessarily an aggressive deck that's going to take out a couple of your opponent's lands to get there in advance. So we're defining it by talking about what it's not, which is kind of neat.
Well, I just want to jump in and say that I think the mid-range decks that include the lands package are lands decks.
Okay.
Absolutely. They are. It's like, again, you don't have to always rely on stripping away your opponent's things or getting the Dark Depths combo set up, but the lands are core to the deck, and if you remove that element, it would be an entirely different deck. Definitely. And you don't just remove, like, if you removed the Strip and the Crucible and the land-specific tutors, then you also, there are some other cards that get a lot worse that you will probably want to remove as well, and then you just trim the deck down by so much that it's not recognizable.
The Git Rug.
I do like to separate like the lands mid-range decks with the lands package from the full-on like dedicated lands decks.
Yeah.
But I do think they both are lands decks.
So I want to talk about really quickly the singleton nature of lands and how that changes the format, especially compared to legacy lands. And here are a couple examples of very good cards that work in legacy that don't work in Highlander, and I'd like to discuss that. Punishing Fires. There was an entire legacy deck for a while that was blue, like Jund Punishing Fires. You get a couple of copies. So the important 2-card combo here is, one is the card Punishing Fires is a 2-mana instant for 1 and a red. Deal 2 damage to target creature or player, and whenever an opponent gains life, you may pay red. If you do, return it to your hand. And then there was a land called Grove of the Burn Willows, which was a red-green land that when you tapped it, your opponent gained a life. So you could use these 2 cards to effectively lock all your opponent's creatures out of the game, set up a kill fairly reliably. With your life from the loam, you're bringing back multiple copies of Grove of the Burn Willows. You're also very happy to get multiple copies of Punishing Fires into your bin, and that worked as a really reliable engine to seal games or lock your opponent out.
So you figure even with tutors and so forth, this 2-card combo is just like no good.
It was really slow. I've tried playing it, and I've seen Wheeler.
I've played it a bunch too.
Yeah, this is one of the weirder divides where, again, the legacy variant of lands is very much a grindy control, like you're locking down a lot of what your opponent's doing and validating what they're doing, and then you kill them with a Dark Depths or you kill them with Concession.
Or Mutavault slowly over like 30 turns.
Yeah, factory beat down,
Right?
whatever
Yeah,
it may
factory's better than
be.
Mutavault in that case, yeah.
Or slowly punishing firing them
often.
out of the game.
That's real slow.
But
It
in
is,
our
it's really
format, right, I think the lands decks that have found the most success within the past year featuring punishing fire are the mid-range decks, where if you are playing the like turbo lands deck, having a repeatable shock is not the best use of your time, because killing their 2 toughness creatures doesn't let your Tarmogoyf attack, or it doesn't let your Planeswalker continuously tick up.
And you just don't have the time. Like, the decks are going to kill you, whereas if you're playing a mid-range game plan alongside, eventually you're going to kill all their creatures. Like, that just gives you enough time.
So you figure that it, punishing fire grove is a thing in our format, but not a lands thing.
Yeah, well, it's just not a reliable engine to set up.
It's
So you have to be willing to play like a slightly clunky removal spell with the upside that sometimes you'll get to go off. But
the hard part of the 2-card combo is if you incident combo synergy, 2-card synergy, is if you oops into it, you feel pretty clever. But it's very hard to dedicate your tutors to that. So, for example, you play your crop rotation, your 1 copy of crop rotation, and you're like, I could grab Caracas, I could grab Tabernacle, I could grab Maze of Ith, I could grab Strip Mine. I'm going to grab Grove of the Burn Willows. So unless unless you need to fix for red, and a bunch of like checklist things come up, you're like, coincidentally, I already have Punishing Fires in hand, and my colors are bad, and literally all of those other lands that I just mentioned wouldn't be better here.
Yeah, your tutors for combo lands or like prison style lands decks it's just brutal haymakers, and because you're limited, you really need to get them to either kill your opponent, because that's the only way it's going to happen, or lock your opponent out. Like, if you are the mid-range deck, sometimes you'll Sylvan Scrying for a Blood Crypt. Just because you need it. But then for the lands, you're just like, oh, this Sylvan Scrying, well, I could get another colored mana source, or I could get Dark Depths, Tabernacle, Glacial Chasm, Strip. Like, there's a priority list for the cards. There's so much overlap, but again, it's
just to sort of elaborate on that, it's because all of your cards are so like built to abuse those other cards, whereas in the mid-range deck you're fine just playing a mid-range game plan, so you just want to cast spells. But just casting spells in like the dedicated land decks isn't cutting it. You have to be doing something busted pretty quickly.
Grazing Gladeheart needs just a little help.
It does.
Just a little help.
It's
to
amazing
go
that we're
off.
talking about like, Punishing Fires and Grove of Burn Willows, meh, but Grazing Gladeheart, give me that antelope.
Chatty off.
All right, now we're talking about trying to go fast. We're trying to do busted things, and you're always looking for more ways to make a Highlander deck consistent, because again, we're in single card, 100-card singleton. Now, here are 2 other 1-mana green enchantments that are very good in Legacy and aren't as good here. Let's see if Wheeler, self-professed.
One's more of a commander card and one's more of a legacy card.
All right.
Name
them, Wheeler. Come on, this is a test.
You're probably talking, I mean, it could be Exploration, but I think that card's reasonable in our format, but Burgeoning and Mana Bond come to
Damn,
mind.
you nailed it. Okay. So what's Burgeoning?
Was the Premier Lands pilot. Burgeoning is a 1-mana green enchantment that I believe says whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card. Oh, okay, well now it's up. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield.
And what's Mana Bond?
Mana Bond's a 1-mana green enchantment from Exodus that says at the end of your turn, you may discard your entire hand. If you do, you may put, I believe, any number or all lands cards that were discarded this way into play.
So close.
During discard.
You put lands into play, then you discard your hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The function of sort of thing, right?
Why don't these cards work in Highlander?
Like this other
I know we both tested Mana Bond. We both tested Mana Bond.
So the density Burgeoning is only like we've both tried Burgeoning. Lord knows.
Yeah.
There's just not enough opponents. you got one. You're just like land Burgeoning, and they're like, all right.
Mox kill you.
I'll play my land. You're like, haha, untap, land, go. And like, there's just it doesn't do provide enough. Exploration, it lets you kind of do something similar, but also lets you operate entirely on your terms, right? It lets you strip them twice a turn or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it plays better with your Life from the Loams, your land recursion.
And
What's exploration do?
1 green enchantment from Urza's Saga. You may play an additional land each turn.
Just the smallest dab from Alex there.
Yeah. And then Mana Bond is just like, again, we talked about the importance of your spells. Like, discarding your spells, not great.
But if your hand is just all punishing fires and Life from the Loams, isn't that value?
Well, Serge, you only get one. And then also, you only get one of your lands. So if I, like, Mana Bond and I dump, like, Maze of Ith, Thespian Stage, Dark Depths, or whatever, or, like, a wasteland, 2 wastelands and, like, a port, or double port. Like, in the Legacy variants, you can just, like, poop out a board.
You can win the game on turn 1.
Exactly.
Like, you can set up, like, Dark Depths combo plus Wasteland, their only land, and you're like...
Here you go.
But the odds of doing that in Highlander is just so low.
And the chances of getting this card early enough, too. Like, you need it in your opening. It doesn't do that much in your opening hand unless you have a lot of lands. And then, like, imagine just top decking this card.
And it sets you up in a position where a very threat-light deck needs to top deck the nuts for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Which is not a position you want to be in.
What kind of picture you're in any game of Magic and you're like, all right, turn 1, discard your hand. You're now in top deck mode for the rest of the game. Which deck is going to be like, let's go?
Well, not to mention the land stacks often care about the act of playing lands, and Mana Bond doesn't let you play lands. It puts them into play, which may not seem like a big deal, but it often comes up.
I actually like that point. That is probably, I think, one of the most significant misunderstandings when you talk about a land deck. A land deck isn't a ramp deck. And it kind of can be, and I think that's a big differentiation between Scapeshift and a lands deck. It's not trying to get as many lands out as quickly as possible. It's trying to get as much advantage out of playing the lands as possible.
Surge, it would be a ramp deck if any of your lands tap for mana.
Riftstone Portal, my friend. Riftstone Portal.
Ramp is such a weird term in Magic because, like, it refers to accelerating your mana beyond what you should be at as far as the game saying, hey, 1 land per turn, please. Turn 3, you should have 3 or 4 mana.
Explore.
No,
should have
please,
3, Ben.
Please stop. Please stop.
Top 3 or 4.
Oh, Harrow.
If I don't have 4 mana by turn 3, 4 mana on turn 3, something's wrong.
Just because you don't play by the rules doesn't mean that the rules are different.
If Ancient Tomb is unfair, I don't want to be right.
It is unfair.
What?
This just in.
I forget what I was talking about.
Ramping.
Yeah, ramping. And then you have people talking about, like, there's ramp decks, right? And the ramp decks do ramp, but not all decks that ramp are ramp decks. You know what I'm saying? Because you want to hit your... It's like the medium decks are a good example, too, of where this confusion comes from.
Because you want to accelerate mana out.
I think it's how reliant upon the strategy they are. Like, medium decks aren't ramp decks because if they don't ramp, they can still, like, accomplish their game plan, whereas if Scapeshift doesn't ramp, something went wrong.
Yeah, you want to, like the lands decks too, you have this set number of, like, I need to hit, like, ideally I'm hitting this many lands in play at an accelerated rate or this much mana, but once you hit that, then we could take it a little slow or just end the game. The game's already over. Instead of just, like, continuously wanting to go up and up and up, so your Sphinx's rev is massive, or your beanstalk giant kills people, or Scapeshift with counter magic, like
the medium decks. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're trying to hit 5s, maybe 6s.
Yeah, primarily 5s, but as soon as possible. And the same with, like, there are combo lands decks that, like, you want to get all these pieces out, ideally sooner rather than later, so you don't die.
Yeah, whereas a ramp deck is trying to hit 6, maybe 7, or even 8.
Or 11, you know.
Yeah, that too.
It's like 2 to 4 to God knows what after that. Like, that's that ramp life, you know?
Lance is an interesting archetype, just sort of jumping on what Ben said there. It feels like it is a momentum deck. where you need a couple of pieces, then you can start to snowball, but each piece by itself individually is very weak. And this is specifically in the combo deck. The mid-range deck avoids that because you have these very efficient threats that can protect you and shore up that weakness. But when a lands deck gets ahead and when it gets rolling, it's very, very, very hard to stop that.
We haven't even covered the lands control decks of the past couple of months.
Well, I wanted to finish a definition, and we can get into some specific
sure.
ideas. And I think we're still kind of in the definition phase here.
Yeah, it is relevant in that it kind of bridges the gap between needing to end the game and your cards not doing anything by themselves and having relevant spells that are reactive and not just setting up your little blanket of glacial chasm.
And I think that's an interesting note one last time when we talk about definitions is a lot of the most, air quotes, broken pieces of a lands deck don't do anything by themselves. Fast Bond doesn't do anything by itself. Crucible doesn't do anything by itself, right? If you're playing Crucible and you get to replay a fetch land on a turn, that's good, but you're not winning a game with that, right? It generates a little bit of card advantage. But these pieces, and even people might disagree with what I say here, even Crucible Strip Mine by itself can't win a game. It can, but
and
if you don't have a board state,
The
if you're looking down at an aggro deck,
Crucible Strip Mine,
and you have Crucible Strip Mine, and they have a 2/2, and you don't have a board, and you're spending every turn just.
So you're saying you didn't do it turn one?
And well, yes,
the pain. This happened to me recently. The pain of I'm against a blue opponent, and I set up a Crucible, and they have I got the strip going, and I'm like, okay, great. And they didn't do anything in response to my Crucible. I'm like, oh, perfect. And they just flash in like a Snapcaster Mage. I was just like, okay, this is fine. This is not a lot. And they're just like, attack for 2, play a land, go. And you're like, okay, well, I'll blow up that land and try to do a thing. And they're like, okay, well, I'll counter it. I'm like, okay, go. And they're like, play a land. And they just and they use their mana for cantrips to get more lands. You're just like, huh, why isn't it working?
Yeah. And
I keep doing it.
There's so many games your opponent's like, you're like, aha, I set up Crucible Strip Mine. I'm in a good spot now. And they're like, I'm just going to kill you while you do nothing.
You'll have no lands for the rest of the wait, what are you doing? Stop that. No, don't do that.
He's killing me with an invitational wizard.
And there's a lot of it. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is the thing. A lot of people are so used to thinking back to the Bad Beats games, where the lands player stripped out all my lands. And you're like, okay, and then what? And then I killed them. Okay.
It took us so long to get both Crucible and Life from the Loam removed from the points.
Yeah.
So when I started playing lands, Wasteland pointed. Crucible pointed. Life from the Loam pointed. Fast Bond pointed.
We're so sorry.
All those cards are free. Have I won a tournament yet? No.
Crop rotation now pointed.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not all in one direction.
Does anybody else have any questions as to what lands is before we jump into some specific examples? And I think we've talked about that. It's a synergy deck. It has a package, but every deck that plays lands isn't necessarily a lands deck.
I got a lands question. So if I tap my Llanowar Elf, do I find a forest from my deck, or do I just grab it from outside the game? And if it's a noble hierarch, can I get
Level
an island
1 Judge Ben
or
Wheeler.
a forest or a plains? And can I get both? Can you hear me?
I wish I couldn't.
Which plane of existence am I on right now?
Hello?
Maybe I should talk louder. If I tap... No,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you, James.
What?
Stop that. Good job. So let's talk about control lands. Let's talk about some of these specific archetypes here. So what is a control lands deck? How can you be a lands deck and a control deck at the same time?
So if there's one thing that these decks both have in common is they love hitting land drops and playing their lands for their turn. Not necessarily ramping, but playing the lands for the turn. And it's basically just, this has kind of popped up more in the tail end of the lands mid-range decks, both locally with, well-known pirates and pirates.
Pirates.
It's like, how many
Well-known
local,
pirates.
well-known pirates do we
Well-known
have?
pilots, both like locally, in other communities, on the online community as well. They started moving away from the mid-rangey kind of grindy variety. A product probably spurred by the points changes with Soul Ring going up, Demonic Tutor going up, and most recently crop rotation going up. To something that can grind out the game in more of a traditional controlling fashion, using less kind of creatures that kill your opponent and more creatures that stop your opponent from killing you. Planeswalkers, tutors that don't cost 4 points. The variety, and they're usually very greedy. And I use that term when by my definition, they're greedy because these are 4-color to 5-color decks of all shapes and sizes. They're all playing white, or not white. They're all playing green because you basically need to play green.
Actually, I love this. What colors are lands typically in is a good way to start that.
Green.
So green is essential, and then the
What's
world is your oyster.
the land color tier list?
Okay, we're gonna come back to control. All right, I have my bets.
Yeah.
So on the Friday Night Paper Fight Highlander League, I was playing Bug.
Yeah.
And I think Bug is pretty strong, but it's hard to give up white because white gets United the Reliquary. That's about it. There's that land that goes in your graveyard.
Eladamri's Call is also very
Eladamri's Call is okay to find creatures, but creatures aren't lands.
So do you want like a top 5?
Top
Yeah,
five?
top 5.
All right, so my top 5,
Yeah.
green.
For number 1.
Yeah.
Oh, it's individual colors.
Yeah.
I see.
Bring
Okay.
it. The colors.
And then I have a 3-way tie for second.
Wow.
With blue, black, and red, and then white's last. But they're all good in lands.
So,
And my
okay.
reason, let me give my justification here. Blue is very strong.
Yes.
Blue is very strong, not only because it gives you card draw to help fix your drops and stuff like that, but it gets you Oboro, Moloku, Trade Routes, the effects that let you play multiple lands over and over. And those effects are only in blue.
Yeah.
And it gets you really powerful tutors in Gifts Ungiven and Intuition. Black is very strong because it gets you win cons in stuff like Retreat from Hagra, Obnixilis, Entomb, which is an underrated tutor in lands decks. God Entomb is strong in lands deck, as well as other stuff. Also gets you Bajuka Bog. And Bajuka Bogging is probably one of the best lands you could be playing in a black
Bog
place.
is colorless. Minus 10 points to search.
Yeah, it's technically colorless, but you want to tap for black, and I think that's really, really strong. Red is a completely different deck, and if you're a red lands deck, you have to go into lands, or you have to go into like Seismic Assault and some of your removal there. And maybe if you want, you can go all the way big into Big Daddy Borborygmos if you want to be really
Papa
greedy.
Gizmo.
Yeah, which is some good times in there and gets you more removal.
Fuck it.
Maybe Scape Shift, but it's tough. Like red, you're either all in. I never really splash red, and then white gets you Neither Reliquary. Your move, Wheeler. You disagree with a lot of what I said.
Well, no, I'm just processing a bunch of combo lands cards, like 3 enchantments. that just
Serge,
gotta
What's up,
sit.
Alex?
Do you not play Weathered Wayfarer?
No.
Okay.
What is Weathered Wayfarer? Just so we're all on the
1
same page
mana,
here.
1/1.
Human
Has-
Nomad Cleric.
If you have an activated ability, you can pay a white and tap it, or it has an activated ability. You may search your library for a land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only if your opponent controls.
Card is
More
absurd.
lands.
That's the hard part. It's good. I like it better in like white mid-rangey lists, but in a lands deck, the chances of you having less lands in your opponent means you can't activate Weathered Wayfarer as frequently as you'd like, and you have really good lands tutors in green already.
So this card has gone up in value, in my opinion. It was already pretty high. This is like the eternal best card you're not playing. Like forever, nobody will like. People will not respect this card enough, and it is absurd. And it just keeps getting better and better, and the more fetches that we get, like Prismatic Vista, even Fabled Passage, just like the more wonky ways that you can have more
Yeah.
lands than your opponent and
So
still use the
activating it
ability.
when your opponent fetches, so they have one less land in
Well,
play,
when
is
you-
great.
When you fetch. You
Sure,
need to
sure,
do
sure. Yeah, you crack it and you do the stuff in response there. The issue is if you're against an aggressive deck, they're typically going to have more mana than you, but that's from Moxen or Ancient Tomb mana. So there is enough ways for your opponent to get ahead of you in mana without actually having more lands than you.
Well, Serge, then you just block.
Well, you also just like, yeah, it can. It's a road bump. This card is definitely traded with Jackal Pups.
All right. What
So
are your top five?
my gauge is from a mid-range standpoint, and this might be a little controversial. So, number 1 is obviously green.
Yeah.
Number 2 is Entomb, just Entomb. Number 3 is going to be red. Between Ren and 6, Gamble, Punishing Fire, Lightning Bolt. Like, not a lands card, but from like the mid-range perspective.
Yeah.
Like,
I love Pyroclasms in the red deck. If you're in an aggressive meta, your ability to play cheap removal in red is very, very
Fire
valuable.
Covenant, just like you have all these cheap, efficient ways of removing your opponent's board while while allowing your like strip that, waste that, plan to go forward, and you get the best like creature land one of the best creature lands in Raging Ravine, which ends games very quickly.
All right, I forgot Raging Ravine's pretty strong.
Oh god, if you had asked me this last week, I would have put blue before white. But after playing white this week, from Weathered Wayfarer, Knight of the Reliquary, Savine's Reclamation, which is
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to tell us what that card is.
boy oh boy.
You're
so
wrong about this one.
it's a card from Commander. Well, I think we touched on things.
I panned it pretty hard.
The things that we talked about with this card, I think we are correct. We just skipped over the application of this in like a land set.
So what is this
So
again?
it's 2 and a white. It's a sorcery that says return target permanent with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy the spell and choose new targets. And it also has flashback for 4 and a white. Notably, you don't have to flashback this card. You just have to cast it from a graveyard. So Snapcaster Mage, Dreadhorde Arcanist, or maybe not Dreadhorde Arcanist, Snapcaster Mage,
Goblins, whatever, Goblin Dark Dwellers.
recently Ren and
Or is that
I was
6.
only
gonna say, God forbid you get to retrace it every turn.
I did get to do this quite recently, and boy, oh boy. But yeah, this card getting back any of your mid-range engine cards, so even just like Courser of Crufix and a land, getting back a Wall of Blossoms and a Crucible of Worlds. Yes,
Do you play Renegade Rallier in this deck?
absolutely.
forgot. Okay,
we were about to get to
Yeah.
Renegade
Okay,
Rallier.
Renegade Rallier is also really good.
Wargate, 3 mana
okay,
Teferi.
Wargate's also really good.
Yeah,
Teferi,
white, even Swords and Path too. Swords and
Yeah.
Path are like, oh, you are like for a deck that's blowing up all your opponent's lands, giving them a basic is just like,
I do think that white
Fine.
is arguably the best light splash.
and then
the power level of the power level for the number of cards you get is very, very, very strong. There's just not many white cards.
blue in the mid-range decks, it might put it a little bit ahead of black.
Oh, black
just
also gets you
because-
Gitrog though.
Right, but I'm speaking
How else
purely
will
from
you
the
eat
mid-range.
Thalia?
Yeah. How else do you beat Death and Taxes if you don't have the frog to
Well,
eat
I
the
can
Thalia?
just crop rotation for Caracas, and then Eladamri's call for the
White
frog
gets you
and have it eat it
Caracas.
up.
Even though you don't need white for Caracas, white gets you Caracas. Caracas safer.
But like none of the blue cards are lands cards. It's just like, oh, blue's great in lands. You got Ponder, Brainstorm,
Jace.
Preordain, Jace,
Treasure Cruise.
Narcissus, Leovold,
No, not Treasure
Leovold's
Cruise.
Dig Through Time.
No, not
Intuition.
Dig Through Time. No,
Gifts Ungiven.
Let me finish.
No.
Those are all good cards.
Fact or fiction?
2 mana sorcery. Reveal the top card of your library if it's a land.
Treasure Hunt?
Treasure Hunt. That's the greed. That's the greed. When you play like a 50 land Swans of Bernargal Treasure Hunt deck, oh baby, then you're living.
Zombie Hunt. But then like the black cards are similar to blue in that like the cards I would add for that are more like, obviously Thoughtseize Duress Inquisition are quite good at disrupting your opponent. There are other cards in black. Demonic Tutor's absurd, but like if I'm in black and I'm playing any lands deck, God, I just want Entomb. I will splash for Entomb
Entomb's
or
incredible.
Deathrite Shaman.
Entomb is so good in this deck.
Yeah.
Okay, we have derailed. So we've got our top 5 colors, which is very interesting. We were sort of on the topic of mid-range lands decks. So not only mid-range, but also like a control mid-range deck. I
Yeah.
want to include Alex more in this conversation too, because we've derailed on a couple of things here. Alex, you got some tips on how to beat lands. You've sat across from it a lot, and I think a lot of people, again, think about the bad beats. They think about the landlocks and stuff like that. But what are some of the experiences you've had on taking down these decks? And then we'll sort of finish with combo lands.
Go fast when you're doing nothing.
Go fast when you're doing nothing. So
when the lands deck is doing that.
so you're saying the lands deck often dirtles.
If it's, I mean, okay, so against you do actually have a lot of games where you just like.
You're describing me when I play a lot of Magic, which is I like to feel busy and then realize I haven't done anything.
Yeah, it's like you're assembling your sort of like doomsday engine. It's just like I need to like hustle. I mean, that's maybe not a particularly interesting strategy of go fast and aggro.
I think the single best tip for beating, especially the more dedicated land decks, is to always save your Wasteland, Field of Ruin type effects.
That was the very next thing I was going to say.
Yeah, never just fire it off and try to get them on lands. They play like around 50. You're not going to land goozle them.
Yeah, it's
not
like
going to get the turn 2 Wasteland. Haha.
this strategy actually applies to stuff like Hoof as well. It's like if you know you're against lands or like a land-centric deck, don't try to tempo them on mana.
Yeah,
you will not. It will not be successful.
Definitely
Sandbag
discussed
it.
this deck, this before it, especially relating to Hoof and Academy, because they both have lands that are pretty integral to their strategy. But often you'll fire off a Wasteland and then they'll play Maze of Ith, and then that'll elongate the game 5 turns, or
save it for that Glacial Chasm.
5 turns later they'll play Glacial Chasm, and you're like, oh,
I can't beat
Yeah,
this.
and
so
you're
it's
looking
like-
at the Wasteland in your graveyard and the Taiga in their graveyard. Now they have Stomping Ground and Glacial Chasm, and you're like, huh.
Yeah. So your mana denial strategies are really, really good, but you have to apply them very carefully and sparingly. So you're going to be laughing if you have your Sinkhole, but you're not going to play it on turn 2, most likely.
Hand attack too. Like this is kind of just a generalized rule, but like you need to get the most out of your cards if your opponent has singular cards that just brick everything you're doing. So like if the lands player is going to be tutoring a lot, then they're either tutoring for a land, so save that waste, save that strip for something that matters, or they're tutoring for another spell, so a Crucible or a Courser of Crewfix or whatever it may be. And if they don't, unless they're like tutoring play fast spawn go, then you can probably save that hand attack spell, and you're spending your first couple of turns developing pressure anyways, which is so important, because then you're getting an extra beats because they've spent their entire turn putting a card into their hand, and then you're invalidating whatever card it is they got, which means they have to pivot to doing something else. And if what they're doing after that hand attack isn't great, then that's just more damage you get in.
So I mentioned this earlier, and I think this is a good tip to beat a lands deck, is that it is a momentum deck. And lands is not linear. Lands is not a deck that is trying to do the same thing every game. Because there's all these weird pieces and they kind of fit well together, oftentimes the way you win is going to change every game. And I think as somebody who's playing against lands, you need to forget the previous game. You need to forget the game that happened before on the one card that beat you. When you have your removal, you can't just be like, Life from the Loam goozled me this game. I now have to do everything I can to get rid of it, because you have to remember that that's a card that doesn't do much by itself. So if you have the opportunity to eat a single card from a graveyard and it's Life from the Loam or something else, you need to ask yourself, what is the card that's actually going to beat me here? Is it the Life from the Loam, or is it another piece? And it's tough because some cards have a lot of power level just by themselves, but making sure that you're evaluating the cards in the current context, not the cards in a historical context or the personal bias you have. You're like, I hate Gitrog Monster. Yeah, but was it just that card by itself that beat you, or was it perhaps a couple other cards that led to it on the way?
Here's the other way you get an advantage against lands. In game 1, you make it really clear that you're beating them with draft commons that cost nothing. Then they tilt and
Retreat to Hagra. That's an uncommon, but anyhow.
Wow. Hateful. Let's talk about combo lands. And this is probably my favorite type of lands deck. And unfortunately, it looks like the meta is shifting away from it as more people are getting into these mid-range decks or these control versions of decks.
We can talk later.
And I know Wheeler's been getting into some weird new things with Yogwill and stuff like that, but I want to talk about the classic traditional combo shells that can still win. I mean, obviously, Dark Depths Thespian Stage is an easy way to do that, but when you're looking at a deck that is an all-in lands combo deck, you're stripping away a lot of those value creatures, and you're only playing the things that let you go real fast, real fast.
Or real infinite.
Or real infinite. So your creatures are all going to seem really weird. This is where your Grazing Gladeheart is a standout, which is a 3-mana 2/2 antelope. It's an antelope. It's not an elk, right? Yeah, it's one of the only antelopes in the game.
Not an Elmer.
Cute
And
little
every
antelope.
time a land comes into play, landfall, you gain 2 life.
Jaddy Offshoot.
Jaddy Offshoot, a 0/3 for single green. Whenever a land comes into play, gain 1 life. Even your Courser of Crufix, and all of these cards exist to offset the damage that you would take from Fast Bond. Similarly, Glacial Chasm in this deck plays double role. 1, it keeps your opponent from killing you, which is very important, but 2, it's suddenly a combo enabler. This is a deck that might even play Horn of Greed. Horn of Greed being a 3-mana artifact that it's symmetrical.
Sure it is.
Whenever a player plays a land, now plays, not ETB, so fetch lands don't work, that player draws a card. And you are suddenly creating these lands engines that are seeking to gain infinite life, seek to draw your entire deck, and then you can win with really just elegant ways, like Seismic Assault, which is a red enchantment. Discard a land. Sorry, I didn't realize that Horn of Greed was also... Yeah, Seismic Assault, red enchantment. Discard a land, deal 2 damage to target creature or target player. And I'm sad that this deck is starting to fade. And I blame aggro players.
I mean, that's always just a good thing to blame for everything going wrong in the format.
Stupid aggro
Running
players.
They're
around
just
with
too fast and too consistent. Every time a new set comes out, an aggro player gets better and more efficient creatures and
How
burn
are they going to
spells.
have me dead on turn 3 with 0 points in their deck? I don't understand.
And yet me trying to play nice, balanced, fair Magic, I just keep dying before I can set up my dreams.
See, this is what I'm talking about. You know, Tolarian Academy never hurt anyone. Well, I've got good news, though.
All right.
We've received a new card from Throne of Eldraine,
Yeah.
Mystic Sanctuary.
Oh.
Are you familiar with the card? It's it's an island.
Good.
It's an island, and it has the text. It comes into play tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands. And when it enters untapped, you can put an instant or sorcery from your graveyard on top of your library. This card is absurd with like a Zurin Orb or any kind of squandered resources and ways to play additional lands and ways to draw cards by
Have you done Fastbond, Gush, Regrowth, Mystic Sanctuary yet?
I have not done that yet.
Yeah.
But there are so many
blue
things.
gets you Gush.
Yes, yeah.
Blue gets you Gush in the blue list. How's blue so low for you?
This card is kind of pushing blue back again because Moloku's never been better. You get to Moloku Time Walk with this. You get to well, and the coolest thing is that this past year has been so good. Like sleeper hit, like we were just building up to this card coming out and being just like, oh god, we can combo lands again. Because even having more Horizon lands, so we have more on-color lands to draw the card that we put on top to then cast and create a loop. This card just like has in the past couple of days, the past week, the shenanigans that this card has allowed for is absurd. It's quite good with Savine's Reclamation as well. You can do some cute little things with that. Or just like, I had a game, this is obviously a very corner case scenario, but I had a game where I got to put in like Alpha Strikes. I messed this up because I'm bad at Moto, but my opponent like Alpha Strikes, and I'm able to crop rotation for a Sanctuary to put something on top of my deck, and then Ice Fang Quaddle, the 2-drop flash ETB, draw the card, play it, and goozle my opponent.
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty rad.
But like, yeah, this land is absurd, and it's a land.
And it's an island.
It's an
also
island.
Island for whatever reason. You can fetch for this. Okay, we're kind of running out of time here, unfortunately, because I could talk about lands forever. I think when it comes to some closing remarks, if you are trying to build lands, we've just presented a lot of different ways you can do it, from decks with land packages to mid-range decks, mid-range lands decks to control lands decks to built-in combo decks across all 5 colors of Magic. And I think it's really, really important when you sit down to make your lands deck that you are clear on what it is that it's trying to do. Because I think one of the hardest things about lands is building it wrong, which is it's very easy to do that, and it's going to make your deck worse because you're like, oh, I could grab a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and you throw it all together and it's a mess. And the more streamlined your deck can be, the stronger it will be. Even if it's just blue-green ramp. Just blue-green, get lands out, put in lands cards that work well. Get
Turbo lands.
Like Turbo Land, get to Titania, get to Avenger of Zendikar, old school, kill them. Right? Like that is valid. And you can strip mine lock people in the middle of all of that, and that's fine.
Why not?
But don't just add like, well, now I have to play Entomb. What is it getting you?
It's difficult because so many of these cards suck. They're just not good. Like you look like let's be real here, right? Like a lot of these cards, you just look at them and you're like, why am I losing to this? And so then you'll make cuts and changes to your deck where you're just like, why am I cutting this impulse and adding a retreat to Kazandu? Like, it should not.
I've never gotten Retreat to Kazandu and our boy Knight of the Reliquary to work together.
Oh, no, that's Coral Helm.
Oh, Coral Helm.
All right, I've done that.
In Highlander, I've wanted to. I've played that deck. I've played lands, Bant lands just for that version. All right, I'm digressing again. See, you can go in so many ways. And if you pop off with Swans of Bernargle, definitely tweet it at me because that chef kiss.
You can at me at Premier Lands Pilot.
You're just full of lies. All right, friends. I think it is time to move on to our closing segment, Powerful Magic. We should get on the same page as to what the Powerful Magic song is. Perfect. Oh, wait.
Honk. No, please.
And up today for Powerful Magic is Jer. Jer, tell us a magic story.
So recently I've been playing a pretty sweet bug mid-range deck ever since I got the Throne cards, because I was like, what's the best Oko deck?
Oh yeah.
You obviously want dorks so you can cast them on turn 2.
Oh, turn 2 Oko is beautiful.
And I threw in some Moxes because turn 1 Oko is even better than turn 2
and turning
Oko.
your Mox into a 3/3 Elk?
Woo-hoo! So that's what led me to play the deck, but it's pretty like regular mid-range deck. Removal spells, creatures, planeswalkers. So I'm playing against Brug Tempo in a recent tournament, and it's been a grindy game. I have 4 cards in my hand, but most of them are bad, except for Fallen Shinobi. My opponent's out of cards, but they have a Tarmogoyf in play, and I have a Leopold. Their Tarmogoyf is quite large because it's been a long game. So they attack me. I don't block because I ain't chump blocking with no Leopold. Then I attack them back, and they're like, take 3. And I'm like, no, wait. Ninjutsu Fallen Shinobi. Oh, sorry. They had 1 card in hand. They tried to kill Leopold. With the trigger on the stack, I got to ninjutsu it, still draw the card off Leopold, save Leopold. I hit with Fallen Shinobi. I get their Jace the Mind Sculptor, bounce their Tarmogoyf, game over. And then in a fun game later on, I was playing against Goblins. I was getting absolutely destroyed, as these mid-range decks often do against Goblins. But I had a Fallen Shinobi, and I attacked them. I hit Kiki Jiki and Goblin Sharpshooter off the Fallen Shinobi.
Why was their Goblin deck playing Kiki Jiki?
I don't know, but
I went to break the mirror.
Can you really quickly tell us what Fallen Shinobi is and why you've been just crushing people with it?
Yeah, so it's 3 black blue for it's a zombie ninja. Alex, it's a zombie. Get it in. This card's insane. Ninjutsu for 2 black blue. It's a 5/4, which is just absurd stats for this card. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until end of turn, you may pay those cards without paying their mana cost.
Well, hang on.
Play, you get
You can do
lands as well,
lands.
and the things, and they're free.
You don't even have to cast them.
Free things.
Just free things. This card is absurd. I did a Modern Horizons draft. I had 2 of these.
So did Adam. I passed him the second one because he was complaining that it was going badly. Little did I know he already had one of the best cards in the set, so I gave him a second. He won. It wasn't close.
So you hit, and your 2 free cards are a Goblin Sharpshooter and a Kiki Jiki. Okay, I mean, cool game.
And you can just do so many sweet things, like return a Leovold after it's been targeted, because your opponent... No one in Highlander... I've been saying this for years. No one in Highlander plays around pump spells or combat tricks when they should. Like, so many Highlander players have just been conditioned to use their instants at the last possible moment.
Yeah.
Blood Rush.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blood Rush, Ninjutsu... More and more reasons to just use the bolt on your turn.
Yeah, you're
Or at least
taught
pre-combat.
You're definitely taught to wait as long as possible as a Magic player to get more information, and increasingly cards are coming out that punish you the longer you wait.
I mean, there are just some decks where, like, what do you get by waiting? It's like, well, they could play a sword and equip it, and I can kill it in response. It's like, okay, well that's one thing.
Time to sleeve up red-green Pumperdink.
You just... All right, we're going to call it there. Thank you, everybody, for watching today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want to remind you that Northbound Hunter is brought to you by you, the support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. We'll see you next time. Thanks.